Alright everyone, the cringe fringe continues, and this time, of course, they made an extra fool of themselves up in Wisconsin, actually, in Madison. Keep in mind, the BLM Antifa rioters, we have to point this out every time that I speak about this. This is like the 1% of the 1% of the left. So if you take the left in general, you have people who are center left, you have like the Bidenite sellout neoliberals, you have the actual left, and then you have like the cringe fringe. You have the edge of BLM, you have Antifa, vile, despicable, thuggish bigots, basically. People who, you know, they prefer to throw punches than actually, like, learn a skill. They prefer to throw their own piss at people than, you know, act like a human being. Anyway, these degenerated hordes, they speak for a very small minority of even the left, but they do a lot of damage, and it doesn't help because, as far as I know, not a single Democrat in the federal government has called these people out. Now, this particular story is extra funny. These people obviously don't understand anything about history, or anything else, really, for that matter. Half of them appear to be illiterate. They don't understand the Civil War, especially because Wisconsin is, in fact, north of the Mason-Dixon line. Indeed, was not part of the Confederacy. Since they don't understand geography, these people decided to attack a statue, a Civil War memorial, actually, in Madison. The problem is it was a Union colonel. Now, what do we know about the Union? Those were the good guys, the boys in blue. They weren't wearing gray uniforms and fighting for the Confederacy. This dude was a colonel in the Civil War, but he was not a slave owner. He was from Wisconsin. Wisconsin did not have slavery, indeed. Anyway, so that's really, really funny to me. Then they attacked a state senator. Now, they claim they were antagonized by him. I'm finding that real goddamn hard to believe, though, because he's a Democrat. Again, there's not a mainline Democrat in the country that is attempting to disavow this rioting, looting, thuggish, shooting horde of miscreants and murderers. And at this time, there are literal murders linked to these riots at this point. Fairly early on, you had that retired cop there that was working private security, got shot right in the doorway of the business he was trying to protect from the looters. Not a single bit of outrage over any of the shootings or lootings, the burnings of businesses, the destruction of private property, the literal attempted armed insurrection in several cases. You have heard not one disavowal from Nancy Pelosi, from Bernie Sanders, from Joe Biden, or from any of these people. This individual now has a rude wake-up call. He's a Democrat, and he just got beaten half to death by BLM members for taking a picture. Maybe it'll red pill him and change his mind on who he's supporting. Maybe a few minds will wake up in Wisconsin to say, well, they're destroying Union War memorials now. I wonder, what do all of these memorials, by the way, have in common? Now, at first they said it was just Confederate statues they wanted to go. Well, this is a Union statue, so that doesn't comport. TDRs, that comes way after the Civil War. Most of these statues they're attacking at this point either come from long before, like the Revolutionary period, or long after the Civil War ended. So it's not that. Okay, so it's not that. Then they said, well, it's slave owners. Well, that encompasses Jefferson, but this Union colonel didn't own slaves. He was in the deep northern part of the country. TDR didn't own slaves. He might have had a couple servants. So it's not that. What about, then they said problematic people. Okay, well, TDR, okay, colonialism or whatever the fuck. Yeah, I mean, he was a progressive environmentalist, but, you know, whatever. The only commonality with all of these memorials is that they depict white men. Isn't that very, very interesting? There's literally no other commonality between them. Oh, made of stone, made of bronze. They don't care. Yeah, gilded, roughly carved. Nobody cares. It's a mural. Oh, it's a bust. No, it's a full-on statue. There's no commonality except for their race and their gender. I'm beginning to think it might be a pattern and that this ire might not be directed at police brutality. It might not have to do with racism. It might have to do with the fact that these people are intrinsically racist against a certain race, and maybe they don't like a certain gender in some cases. I'm thinking that's probably the reason. There was a funny image the other day where they had those people kneeling and putting up their fists, and there was a dude in drag, actually, at the side, and there were several of the protesters, and probably rioters as well, were there, and they were sort of looking sideways on the picture at him, and it was just a really funny moment. Yeah, I would say that the left is overstretching. We've gone, in the course of a few weeks, we've gone from, okay, you can't have Confederate memorials, to you can't have memorials by anyone who owned slaves, to you can't have memorials by anyone who we deem problematic, to the point where they're like, fuck this Union colonel too. And by the way, let's assault a state senator. He took our picture. Oh my God. You know, the reason why they didn't want their picture taken is because they know they can be charged with a crime if that picture gets put on the internet and they get identified. Why do you think these people wear masks? It's real fucking convenient that there's a pandemic, so you've got all these Democratic lame-ass politicians saying you need to wear a mask too. So you're basically telling protesters in some states to violate the law, whether they're protesting or rioting or not. Isn't it? Didn't New York City pass an ordinance years ago that you could be arrested if you wore a mask to a protest? And now that you have to wear the mask to the protest? It's interesting how the times have changed. It's interesting now how people who literally fought for the Union against the Confederacy are now considered problematic. I guarantee most of these people in this rioting, looting, thuggish horde didn't even know who the dude was. They see Civil War Memorial, they think of slavery, they don't know anything about the dynamics of the Union versus the Confederacy. Hell, if you ask them to draw the line between the Confederacy and the Union, that it would look like forked lightning. And this is, by the way, this isn't just leftists, this is, most people are ignorant of history. They don't like it, they find it boring. This is a big fucking problem, by the way. Those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. I don't know which one I fear worse. The left continues to overstretch and topple statues and stuff and erase history, and we lose one-of-a-kind, irreplaceable stuff. Or the natural backlash, which is that at some point people that are on the right are going to say, okay, enough is enough, and take matters into their own hands and adopt, I don't know, fascism or something. Like, instead of it being Jared Holt proclaiming extremism, far-right fascists are rising up all over the place, and it's like some YouTuber who said the N-word 10 years ago, and that's supposedly extremism. It won't be like that. No, it'll be armed militias defending public property and private property. Dude, they've started to burn people's homes in some of these places. And the whole goal is to antagonize a disproportionate response. I maintain that Kurt Schlichter is fundamentally correct. But there does need to be a response. People, individuals in these communities need to understand these rioting, looting, thuggish hordes comprise a tiny fringe of the left. The protesters at large are less than 1% of the fucking goddamn country. So the protests are 1% of the country. The rioters and looters are 1% of the protesters total. It's not an army. It's a bunch of disorganized, unruly mobs. Well, you know, you can take care of the problem. The police obviously are unwilling to. They're not willing to guard public property. They're not willing to respond to calls at private property. You've got a judicial system that in some of these states is set up deliberately to prosecute people for self-defense, and it's about time that the bums get thrown out. You have real honest-to-goodness reform. You can balance police reform with private self-defense. You need less policing. You need less high-powered rifles in the hands of cops if private citizens are well-armed and able to defend themselves. Nationwide stand your ground, nationwide castle doctrine. Duty to retreat is unconstitutional. It should be tossed out completely. That's number one. The idea of excessive force, like, oh, well, you were being attacked with a knife and you used a gun. That's disproportionate. We're prosecuting you for manslaughter. Is completely fucking ridiculous. We need to throw out all the federal judges and other miscreants, commissioners and so forth, prosecutors that are attempting to enforce anti-self-defense legislation. That's the kind of reform that we need. That's the kind of reform that we need. As far as the fact that public property, well, you know, toppling a statue isn't killing someone. Actually, there was one case where they almost did. Remember when BLM members and Antifa were toppling that one statue and it landed on top of a dude, and I think he recovered. I think he's still alive. Not even sure anymore. It's like a fog of war situation in some of these inner city neighborhoods. Keep in mind, this isn't even the majority of the urban population. This is a phenomenon that's limited to a few urban areas that are poorly policed, number one, run by the far left that won't do anything about it, number two, and often have draconian anti-self-defense laws, number three. In other places, even in large cities, the police are willing to get involved. They're not going to listen to some idiot judge telling them not to use tear gas on a group of people burning their local Wendy's. The private citizenry is armed and well able to respond, and really these blighted zones that are overrun by Antifa morons are relatively small in most cases. I find it hilarious though. It's like, and then again, you're not going to get any disavowal from any of the mainline Democrats. It won't even become a major story. I would think that a state senator getting attacked by a mob of people for taking their picture is pretty big news. But you haven't really heard about it. Most of you probably, this is the first time you even knew that this happened the other day in Madison. You probably never heard about them dumping that statue into the pond, the Union Colonel. Yeah, these people have a legitimate grievance. Okay, let's just beat everyone in the streets and burn things down. Let's attack a few homes. Let's get some cheap shit. We're going to break into Target and loot the place. That'll help police brutality. That'll help draw attention to the issue. Yeah, it'll draw a lot of negative attention, dude. And the left is overstretching, and they're going to do what they usually do, which is they're going to have enough rope and they're going to hang themselves. That's about all. Peace out.